Hello everybody, it's Foo here, and today we've just found out about the Crown Tundra DLC, which will be releasing towards the end of October in just under a month's time, which is very exciting. But I specifically wanted to talk to you about some of the new information we've received, specifically about the reveal of Galarian Slowking. This was already teased, and a lot of people knew that this was going to be announced, but it's really cool to see how this has actually been implemented. I actually didn't expect to be as excited about this Pokemon as I am, but we found out some really cool stuff about the mechanics, which is always the stuff that really gets me interested. So now we can speculate about how you will want to use Galarian Slowking and how good it will be. So first off, the design is pretty goofy. The weird shell thing has now become like a visor with eyes, and its rough collar around its neck has turned into more of a cape, which is pretty cool. Just worth noting that upside down, it kind of looks like PogChamp, which is very strange. I don't know how I saw this, but it just popped into my head, and now you will not be able to unsee it. But in terms of the actual information we know about this Pokemon, we now know it's going to be Poison Psychic type, which is kind of what we guessed because Galarian Slowbro is obviously that typing. Some people were maybe speculating it could be like Dark Poison. I didn't really want to see that. Maybe Dark Psychic. I didn't really want to see those because we've already got a lot of Pokemon that fill those type combinations, so it's nice to stick with the Psychic Poison because it's a relatively new typing that you haven't seen so much before. We also know that it gets a new attack. This is a Psychic type attack called Eerie Spell, which deals damage and also reduces the PP of the last move the target used by 3, which can be really good. If you consider some low PP moves, if you use Eerie Spell on a 5 PP move, they've already just used 1 and you reduce it by 3, they've only got 1 more chance to use that move, which can be very, very powerful. So PP ups are going to be even more important going forward. But I think it's actually a pretty interesting move, and it can really put pressure on your opponent to make those right decisions. If this Pokemon had the pressure ability, that would have been a very interesting combination, because for a 5 PP move you could just reduce their PP down to 0. So I think that would be a really cool combination to see. Maybe even doubles, you pair it up with a pressure Pokemon. That could be really, really fun. I don't think it's super broken, and actually I don't even think it's as useful as Galarian Slowbro's Shell Sidearm, but I do like it as a secondary effect of a damaging move because we haven't seen that before. And the next piece of new information we know about Galarian Slowbro is its ability. It has the Curious Medicine ability, which sounds really cool. So when you switch Galarian Slowbro in, any stat changes of its ally are reset. Now, this is slightly disappointing because it would have been much, much cooler if when you switch Galarian Slowking in, all stat changes are reset. That would have been really cool to see because it would have had a big impact on the singles metagame as well. If something's trying to sweep you, you could just switch in Galarian Slowking, reset the stats back to 0 and go from there. But that might have been a bit too powerful, so I understand why they might have dialed it back. I think I would have preferred to see resets your opponent's stats. That would have been more interesting, but we haven't seen that. What we see is resets your ally stats. Now, there's a really cool example on the Pokemon website where it actually shows the interaction with Intimidate. It's not exactly clear how the photos they've set up have worked in terms of the chronology, but it looks like at the beginning of the battle, the opponent sent out their Pokemon, you sent out your Pokemon, Arcanine's Intimidate activated, and then straight away Slowking's ability Curious Medicine activated. And that could just be because of speed order. The faster Pokemon's ability activates first, and then Galarian Slowking's ability activates to remove Intimidate, which is a really neat ability to have in the doubles format. You also have to consider in the age of Dynamax, there are tons of Dynamax moves that will reduce your stats. So being able to then switch in Galarian Slowking after a Max Phantasm and remove your allies' defense drops could be really, really helpful. So I don't think it's broken. I don't think it's game changing, but I do think it's useful. And I think that you could really play around with it and surprise the opponent if they're expecting to get a KO on one of your Pokemon that has reduced defenses, and you switch in Galarian Slowking so that they can survive. I can see some really interesting play there, so I really like that ability. Now, the main piece of information we don't have about Galarian Slowking yet are its stats. And what I want to do now is just to speculate a little bit about those stats, because that really affects what role Galarian Slowking might play. If we take Galarian Slowbro as an example of how these stats might be implemented, we can see, comparing to its normal form, It has the same HP stat and the same speed stat. So I think that's probably going to be the same for Galarian Slowking. It's probably going to have base 95 HP, which is great, and base 30 speed, which is very slow, but good for Trick Room. And then Galarian Slowbro has gone a lot more offensive. So it's got base 100 in attack and special attack, making both attacking stats usable. And then it's got a decent defense stat and a lower special defense stat, which kind of mirrors the normal Slowbro form that has a higher defense stat and lower special defense stat. What I think we're more likely to see with Galarian Slowking, I think there are two possible ways that this could be implemented. The first one is it's basically just the same as Galarian Slowbro, but you just swap the defense and special defense stats around. So it's still more of an offensive Pokemon, but has a higher special defense compared to Galarian Slowbro. I would be slightly disappointed with this though. What I want to see, it being a more defensive Pokemon, so swapping the offensive and defensive stats. So that would mean that Galarian Slowking would have something like 70 attack, 100 defense, 95 special attack, 100 special defense, and 30 speed. Because I think this would be much better to show off its more supportive role, especially with that ability that's helping your allies' stats out. You want a more bulky Pokemon to be able to switch in when you need it to switch in and nullify those stat changes. And that would also be really good for it being a Trick Room setter, because it would be very bulky with 95 HP and 100 in each defense, and a pretty good defensive typing. I think this could be a really interesting Trick Room setter option. So that's kind of what I want to see in Galarian Slowking's stats. It would still be relatively strong because base 95 special attack would be pretty good, and I do expect it to be a special attacker over a physical attacker. So that's what I'm hoping for, but it remains to be seen if that's what we'll get. They definitely changed Galarian Slowbro's stats quite drastically from the usual Slowbro. So it would be interesting to see if a similar thing is done with Galarian Slowking. We could potentially see its special attack rocket up at the cost of some attack and some of its defenses as well, which would be interesting to see. So those are my thoughts about Galarian Slowking. I think in the singles format, you'll probably see Regenerator used over its new ability. But if it is quite a defensive Pokemon, I can see that PP reducing move being very good because it could be on stallier teams, and actually PP stall could well be a good tool to utilize on such teams. And then in the doubles format, I see it being a bulkier Trick Room setter that's also providing utility for defense against things like Intimidate, which is very common there, and also the max moves, maybe switching in later on and removing any drops that you might have from things like Max Strike, Max Phantasm, or Max Darkness. But this announcement has got me really excited for the Crown Tundra. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the content and to support the channel. All that's left to be said is I've been Foo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.